Welcome back to the Torque Test channel. Today we finally have a look at the DeWalt mid-torque DCF894, a long overlooked on this channel brushless mid-torque from a main player in the cordless arms race. But I'm glad we did wait this long, as we learned some interesting findings that we would have not noticed otherwise without the mountain of data we've compiled on this channel so far with all the mid-torques we've tested. So she's going to hit the dyno up against Milwaukee's latest mid-torque, the Gen 2 2962, as well as DeWalt's red cousin, the Craftsman mid-torque. Then at the end of our testing, both Milwaukee and DeWalt will be strapping on some sweet 21700 cell 6 amp hour battery packs and duking it out again to see if perhaps that changes things before we hit the rank chart. One of the reasons, heck maybe the main reason, we haven't touched on this DeWalt mid-torque until a kind super viewer Gabriel sent us one was because of its, well, let's call it not overly ambitious torque specs. The 894 calls out 330 foot-pounds fastening torque. Of course, that's not a breakaway spec like their 899 high torque boasts that you'd be able to compare to Milwaukee's flavor of nut busting. But even if we were just talking base specs here, that's 330 compared to 550 fastening of the Milwaukee. Not exactly 2021 type numbers there, but that should be no surprise. This mid-torque is a 2017 offering from DeWalt. 2017 may not sound very old to you, but with new hotness from Makita busting up our rank chart and TTI's tree of brands seemingly really focusing on the mid-torque size range with Milwaukee's Gen 2, Ryobi's HP1 Plus coming out within the last year, and heck, even Rigid's Octane is a newer model than this DeWalt, and that's being replaced early next year with an even newer version. Is DeWalt really 1 to 2 generations out of date compared to its rivals? Today we find out. After all, maybe its claims are just conservative, like the Craftsman we tested, which is made by the same Stanley Black & Decker folks who make DeWalt. If that one was underselling itself, maybe this one is too? Its age is also showing a bit in its size department. While the Milwaukee's mids are getting shorter and more powerful with each generation, this XR is still clocking 7 inches, which might compare decently to the 7.2 inch OnePlus Ryobi, but we doubt DeWalt's crosshairs are really on that Ryobi name, so it's not really knocking on the door of the 6 inch Milwaukee in this case. Not being the latest model, it does however benefit from price erosion a bit. You can pick up a brand new 894 for $149 in the link below. We're about a year out from the M18 2962's release, and you'd be hard-pressed to find one of those for less than $219. Yes, of course, there's sales and battery BOGOs at stores, but DeWalt has those too at those same stores that you'd find the Milwaukee. So there is some cost savings to be had if this brings the beans. Maybe not over-the-top value like a budget Craftsman, but we'd venture to guess that you're more likely to have spare DeWalt batteries and chargers lying around than V20 Craftsman this day and age. Speaking of batteries, we'll be using the standard 5 amp hour XR DeWalt battery today to compare to the XC5.0 the Milwaukee is using, but Gabriel was kind enough to also send us this fat with a pH 6 amp hour XR battery that's rocking 21700 cells. Around a year and a bit ago, DeWalt switched this 6 amp hour pack from 2700 cells to 21700 cells, meaning it could utilize those sweet Samsung 30T batteries and their massive discharge rate, something that within the XC6.0, almost every M18 tool we've tested has preferred over almost everything else. So we're excited to see if today this DeWalt enjoys the same thing. Being that this 6 amp hour pack is date coded for 2021, we should be well clear to exercise some of that 21700 action instead of the old 2700s. So let's see it. Our first test is working torque 5 seconds and forward. Here's the Milwaukee up against the Craftsman V20. Yeah, so one thing you'll notice about these tests is the Milwaukee comes out the gate pretty hard for a mid-torque of any size. Here's the DeWalt DCF894. $229 and under the Craftsman? What? Well, before you sell off your DeWalt stock, let's jump into reverse. Reverse is where impact wrenches go from useful to necessary on stuck bolts, so let's see that. Here's the Milwaukee and Craftsman again. Both look pretty strong if we're honest. Now here's the DeWalt. $347 up on the Craftsman at $330, but also cross pass with it on the way there. But yeah, neither of them touching that Gen 2 for now. Our best case scenario test is 15 seconds in forward or reverse, whichever they prefer. Here's the DeWalt taking on its Craftsman brother in Milwaukee on screen. Same sort of relationship with Craftsman as the max run as well. And both the Craftsman and DeWalt picked up very little in a 15-second test versus a 10-second run compared to the Milwaukee, or really most tools. This is a phenomenon we saw with the DeWalt High Torque as well, which brings us sort of to the elephant in the room. The Craftsman and DeWalt Mid Torques are basically the same tool. Let's just face it, they gotta be. The Craftsman is 7 inches long. DeWalt calls their XR 6.95 inches. The DeWalt weighs 3.5 pounds. The Craftsman weighs 3.52. Besides a slight difference in performance on the curve, which based on past testing of DeWalt batteries could be explained by 4 amp hour Craftsman versus 5 amp hour DeWalt here, or even a slightly more forward torque bias of the Craftsman versus a more reverse bias of the DeWalt, if such a thing exists for a brushless motor. Check out the Craftsman's forward best case scenario test here, which we haven't shown before. It's making 333, and that slightly bests the DeWalt, shown here. These tools compare with each other like no other two tools we've tested. If we didn't know about Stanley now owning Craftsman and making both of these tools, we feel like we would have figured it out just based on these tools' similarity. And yet the DeWalt Mid is $150 now, and the Craftsman is $119. DeWalt is rated at $330 and the Craftsman is rated at $275. Admittedly, both tools overshot their torque claims, something Stanley apparently should be getting props for, so kudos to them. But this looks like some protection for the aging DeWalt lineup to us. You can't be putting the same specs on a mid to budget tier Craftsman and charging less at the same time, right? That's just bad press for that yellow DeWalt brand. If you think about it, it would make little to no sense for Stanley to invest in an all-new brushless tool under the Craftsman name just to charge less. That would cost more than just slapping a new injection molded body onto an existing DeWalt, which we theorize is what's happening here. Of course, we're not able to assess the connector or board quality or brand name versus generic capacitors, resistors, and chips, but when it comes to power, weight, size, those two are as interchangeable as it gets, despite the price and specs difference that the two brands under the Stanley name would have you believe. However, while Craftsman does offer a 9 amp hour battery that's chock full of 18650s, what DeWalt can offer over at Craftsman is fancy-pantsy batteries, flex volt batteries in high capacities, and XR batteries that are even a little bit better in many cases due to 21700 cells, something that we've seen time and time again can make a big difference on 18/20 volt tools. So let's see it. Here's the DeWalt Mid Torque with a 6 amp hour XR battery up against the M18 using an XE 6.0 and that Craftsman. $429 now, not bad, but lots to unpack on this one. For one, DeWalt is able to close that gap quite a bit with Milwaukee using the same type of battery. And two, DeWalt puts on quite a lead over Craftsman now and is able to erase that low-end torque deficit out the gate we were seeing. But number three, we should point out that the best case scenario tests show off the best run out of 3 of these tools, and This DeWalt, like most DeWalts we test, if we're honest, saw quite a bit of difference between runs. We think it's sort of based on how you hold it so that it doesn't sort of stall during its progress, which is not common for most impacts we've tested, maybe 1 in 20. Either way, the 6 amp hour pack did make as low as 390 on a run, although each time coming out the gate harder than the Craftsman, we should say. With all of its power runs in the books, let's take a look at that rank chart. It's starting on the bottom from now. Its power runs are turned into points as 23, 35, and 36. At 6.95 inches long, it's relatively short compared to budget options and made decent power, so that's 52.2 foot-pounds per inch. Stanley's brands are holding true to being underrated, and that 330 claim was surpassed even in its max run with a 5 amp hour battery, and it gets max points or 100% here. $149 ain't bad for what you can buy one of these nowadays, and it makes 36.5 points here in its value score, which totals 282.7 points, putting into 5th place, right below the Craftsman. Unsurprisingly, it has very similar performance but costs less than this DeWalt, so it gets a few more points on top of it. But if we're talking just power, let's head over to our average power rank chart for the first time among mid-torque category. Here's its average power across the run with any battery we could get our hands on. That's enough for the DeWalt to climb up into 4th place, using its 6 amp hour battery to make 326 foot-pounds on average across the run. Now, Milwaukee also benefits from us having had the HD 12.0 on hand, and that sees a gain up to 1st place here as well. Without the 6 amp hour battery, the DeWalt would see 276 foot-pounds, or just above the Craftsman, as you might expect. Were you surprised with today's results as we were? We sort of wrote DeWalt's mid-torque off originally because of their own too honest power stats versus the world we live in today of pie-in-the-sky numbers. Once we saw what the Craftsman could do, and made by the same folks who rated that at 275, we figured the DeWalt might be packing more beans than we assumed. And we were right. For 150 bucks, if you have DeWalt batteries and chargers, this is a no-brainer, we think. Will it take down a Milwaukee though, or be similar size? Nope. But considering the DeWalt came out when the Milwaukee Gen 1 was being sold, it's better than you might think, or like we thought. And those DeWalt batteries are certainly more universally useful than Craftsman, but it does sort of make us wonder if these tools are the same like we're claiming. What else was it cheaper for Stanley to make the same rather than make exclusively new, yet still cheaper somehow for Craftsman? On the other side of the coin, the impacts Stanley makes under Mac tools that sell for hundreds more than DeWalt, are those also still the same? Better? Tuned differently? Stick around by clicking subscribe as we find that out. Thanks for watching.